Hello, and welcome to Sleep Stories World. I'd like to invite you to step into a world of relaxation and tranquility with this bedtime story, designed to help you unwind and de-stress. By engaging in this story, you can embark on a journey that nurtures and soothes your mind, promoting overall well-being through sound, restful sleep. Before we begin, let's prepare your space for rest. Ensure you're somewhere comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything, your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, please do so now. When you're ready, lie down and let yourself settle into your bed. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket as your body relaxes. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Your only task now is to be here, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand. Breathe out, feeling your body sink deeper into your bed. In and out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. Now, imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, carrying with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your chest. As you breathe out, imagine it spreading gently through your upper body. Breathe in, and let the light expand through your shoulders, your arms, your back. Breathe out, and feel it filling your stomach, your neck, your head, every space within you glowing softly. If a thought comes by, acknowledge it like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream, and then let it drift away. There will be time for those thoughts later. Now is for rest. On your next breath in, let the warm light travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, your knees. Breathe out, and sense it flowing down to your ankles, to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Focus on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. If your mind wanders, simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey toward sleep. And now, let us begin. As the Antarctic spring arrived in October 1911, the sun returned to the frozen continent, climbing higher each day until it circled endlessly around the horizon. The temperature, though still brutally cold, began its slow climb from the depths of winter. Both expeditions stirred to life, making final preparations for the journeys that would define their lives and their legacies. Amundsen was ready first. His plan was precise, his equipment tested, his route mapped. On October 20, 1911, he departed Framheim with 4 carefully chosen companions: Olof Bjaaland, an expert skier and skilled carpenter; Helmer Hansen, the expedition's most experienced dog handler; Sverre Hassel, another veteran polar traveler, and Oscar Wisting, a reliable and unflappable naval gunner. Together, these 5 men would make the attempt on the pole. They traveled with 4 sledges, each pulled by a team of 13 dogs, 52 dogs in total at the start. The sledges carried approximately 400 kilograms of supplies each, carefully distributed to balance the load. Every item had been weighed, every calculation checked and rechecked. Amundsen's plan called for the systematic slaughter of dogs along the route, a grim but pragmatic decision. As the sledges grew lighter with consumed supplies, fewer dogs would be needed to pull them. The excess dogs would be killed and fed to the remaining dogs and, when necessary, to the men themselves. It was harsh, but Amundsen viewed it as the mathematics of survival. He had calculated exactly how many dogs would be needed at each stage of the journey. The Norwegian team moved swiftly across the ice shelf, covering 15 to 20 miles on good days. They were all expert skiers. Skiing was as natural to these Norwegians as walking, and they glided alongside their sledges, conserving energy while the dogs did the heavy work of hauling. The weather during the first weeks was remarkably cooperative, with clear skies and manageable temperatures, though manageable in Antarctic terms still meant well below 0 Fahrenheit. Scott's departure was delayed by various factors: the late arrival of supplies, last-minute adjustments to equipment, and his decision to wait for slightly better weather. His expedition finally left Cape Evans on November 1, 1911, 12 days after Amundsen. Scott's party was considerably larger and more complex. The main support group included 16 men, 33 dogs, 19 ponies, and 2 of the 3 motor sledges. The third motor sledge had already broken through the sea ice and sunk during the unloading process months earlier, an inauspicious beginning. The motor sledges, which Scott had placed such faith in, performed poorly almost from the start. Within days, both remaining machines broke down in the cold, their engines seizing and their tracks failing. The complex machinery, so impressive in English testing grounds, proved no match for Antarctic conditions. The sledges were abandoned on the ice, and the expedition continued without them. It was a significant blow to Scott's plans, but he pressed forward, now relying entirely on the ponies and dogs, and ultimately on the men themselves hauling sledges by hand. The ponies suffered terribly in the cold. Unlike dogs, which could sleep comfortably in the snow and seemed almost energized by the freezing temperatures, the ponies were miserable. They sweated while hauling, and that sweat froze on their coats, creating ice that chilled them further. Scott's men built snow walls each night to shelter the ponies from the wind, but the animals grew weaker with each passing day. They were, in hindsight, poorly suited to Antarctic conditions, a fact that would become increasingly clear as the journey progressed. Scott had organized his expedition in waves. A large support party would accompany him partway, helping to haul supplies and establish the route. Then, at predetermined points, groups of men would turn back, leaving their supplies for the continuing party. This pyramidal approach would culminate with a small final group making the ultimate push to the pole. It was a sensible strategy in theory, allowing Scott to penetrate deeply into the continent with maximum supplies while only needing to feed a small group for the final stages. By early December, both expeditions faced their first major geographical challenge: the ascent from the flat expanse of the Ross ice shelf up onto the polar plateau itself. Antarctica's interior sits at an elevation of approximately 9,000 to 10,000 feet above sea level, roughly the height of the peak of many mountains. Reaching this plateau required climbing enormous glacier, rivers of ice that flowed slowly down from the heights, creating landscapes of spectacular beauty and terrible danger. Amundsen's route took him up the Axel Heiberg Glacier, a steep and difficult climb that he discovered only as he approached it. The glacier rose in a chaotic jumble of ice towers, crevasses, and pressure ridges. Crevasses, deep cracks in the ice, sometimes hundreds of feet deep and often hidden beneath thin bridges of snow, were the most feared hazard. A man or dog could step onto what appeared to be solid ground only to have the snow bridge collapse, plunging them into an abyss. Amundsen's men roped themselves together and proceeded with extreme caution, testing the ground ahead with poles and watching for the telltale signs of hidden dangers. The climb up the Axel Heiberg took 4 days of exhausting work, from November 17 to November 21. The sledges had to be unpacked and their loads carried piecemeal up the steepest sections, then repacked at the top. The altitude, climbing from sea level to over 10,000 feet, left men and dogs gasping in the thin air. But Amundsen's team emerged onto the polar plateau having successfully navigated the climb without losing a single man or dog to the crevasses. It was here, on the plateau, that Amundsen carried out the most difficult part of his plan. 24 of the dogs were killed, those that were weakest or no longer needed. The meat was divided among the surviving dogs and the men, providing fresh protein that would help prevent scurvy. Amundsen and his men were experienced enough to set aside any sentimentality. These animals had served their purpose, and their sacrifice would help ensure the survival of both the remaining dogs and the men. Still, it was hard work, and the men did it quickly and without discussion. Scott's route took him up the Beardmore Glacier, which he had discovered and named during his previous expedition. The Beardmore is one of the largest glaciers in the world, over 120 miles long and 25 miles wide in places. It is a vast highway of ice, but like all glacier, it is constantly moving, creating zones of intense fracturing where crevasses form in complex, overlapping patterns. Scott's party spent weeks navigating this treacherous landscape. The ponies, already weakened, struggled terribly on the glacier. One by one, they were led to the edge of deep crevasses and shot, their meat cached for the return journey. It was grim work, and the men who had cared for these animals for months found it emotionally draining. By the time Scott's party reached the top of the Beardmore on December 21, all the ponies were gone. From this point forward, the men would haul all their supplies themselves, harnessed to sledges like beasts of burden, pulling hundreds of pounds across the ice. The technique was called man-hauling, and it was brutally exhausting work. Each man wore a canvas harness that fit across his chest and shoulders, attached by rope traces to the sledge. Walking in this harness, leaning forward against the weight, the men would strain for hours, taking short breaks to catch their breath before continuing. On a good surface, they might cover 10 or 12 miles in a day. On rough ice or in soft snow, they might struggle to make even 5 miles, arriving at camp utterly spent. Scott believed there was something noble in man-hauling, a test of British determination and strength. It was also, in his view, more humane than driving animals to death in the cold, though this reasoning conveniently ignored that dogs, unlike ponies, were naturally adapted to polar conditions and could thrive where horses suffered. By late December, both parties were on the polar plateau, that vast elevated desert of ice that stretches across the heart of Antarctica. The plateau is one of the most desolate places on Earth, featureless, windswept, and impossibly vast. The horizon extends in every direction without change, just white meeting white meeting white. The only variations are subtle differences in the texture of the snow and ice, and the occasional sastrugi, wind-carved ridges of hard snow that can be inches or feet high, creating an exhausting washboard surface that makes pulling sledges even more difficult. The temperature on the plateau rarely rose above -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and often dropped to -40 or lower. At these temperatures, breathing becomes painful, ice forms inside face masks and on beards, and any exposed skin can develop frostbite within minutes. The men's sweat would freeze on their clothing, creating armor-like shells of ice. Each night, they would crawl into their tents and sleeping bags still damp from the previous day's exertions, and each morning they would force themselves into the same frozen clothing to begin again. On December 14, 1911, after covering approximately 15 miles that day over relatively good surface, Amundsen's party reached the vicinity of 90 degrees south latitude, the South Pole. They had traveled for 56 days from Framheim. The 5 Norwegians confirmed their position through careful observations of the sun's angle, taking multiple readings to be certain. There was no dramatic landmark, no pole or sign marking the spot, just more ice and snow extending in every direction. But the mathematics were clear. They stood at the southernmost point on Earth. Amundsen and his companions pitched their tent, which they had brought specifically for this purpose and named Polheim, or Home at the Pole. They planted the Norwegian flag, a moment captured in photographs that would circle the globe. Inside the tent, they left a letter addressed to King Haakon VII of Norway and a separate note for Scott, knowing that the British expedition would eventually arrive and find it. The letter to Scott was courteous, asking him to deliver the message to the Norwegian king in case Amundsen's party failed to return. The 5 men spent a day at the pole, skiing in different directions to ensure they had truly crossed the exact mathematical point. Then, on December 17, they began their return journey. The weather remained favorable, and their spirits were high. They had achieved what they had set out to do, and now they had only to return safely. The journey back to Framheim would take 39 days, considerably faster than the outbound journey because they were now traveling downhill, their sledges were lighter, and they knew the route. Meanwhile, Scott and his party were still struggling across the plateau, approximately 300 miles from the pole. They did not yet know they had lost the race. As you settle deeper into rest tonight, imagine the vastness of that white plateau, the isolation of those tiny groups of men separated by hundreds of miles, each focused on the simple, brutal work of moving forward, one step at a time, into the unknown.